We've got a cold snap that's going to be coming in pretty soon. And so today Juan and I are taking a look at what on the surface is a very unsightly mess that actually houses, believe it or not, underneath all this, many, many thousands, if not tens of thousands of tree seeds that are organized at in the orientation of when they germinate in the spring. Very, very low-tech, simple idea. This is our seed storage for the winter. I want to explain what this looks like. We need to get in and get some seeds, and we need to insulate before the cold really settles in. So come along for that. A time-tested technique of storing things with mulch. In this case, it's entirely with leaves. I would encourage you to explore. If you're in a cold climate like we are, maybe there's somewhere deep in the woods where there's a bunch of leaves that blew into a pile. Do an experiment. Poke around underneath the leaves, and you might be surprised where it's absolutely ice cold and frozen and bare soil underneath 6, 8, 12 inches of leaves. You end up keeping things thawed for an entire winter. And so these leaf bags that we picked up in the fall, we're able to dump out as we go. You can see the reason why it's as chaotic in here. So basically all of the actual trees are stored down in ground contact. The crates that you can see are just crates of sawdust. I can't really open them up because they're frozen. They're put throughout as basically roadblocks and speed bumps for our friend George and Lenny. They come through, play, and tear through. We didn't want to block them from being able to enjoy themselves, so we just added in all these little nuggets of whole leaf bags and crates. But deep under the leaves are our actual folding crates of seeds banked in sawdust. Today we need to pull some black walnut seed in particular out for our friend who wants to grow about 1,000 from seed. We're going to trade seeds for turkey wings that he has frozen, and so we need to find where in here they are. George here demonstrating the reason why we need all these speed bumps the whole time. Let me throw a stick for him. Go ahead, have fun. There are two ways that we've leveraged to map out what's going on in here. So when we first laid out all of the crates in this area, and if you're interested in seeing what that all looks like, stick around to the end. I'll put together a montage of how we laid this all out in the fall. As we laid them out, we organized that from the east side to the west side, we have the earliest germinating trees. So the peaches and the cherries and the plums are on the east side. And on the west side, we've got our gumi, our seaberry, pawpaw plants, trees that tend to germinate a little bit later, black walnut somewhere in the middle. So that gives us a gradient of knowing where to look for certain trees and address the seeds in order. We also put these flags in that mark. So for example, here's a flag that says paw, which is short for pawpaw. And so that will let us know that somewhere right around underneath all this is a crate of pawpaw seed. We also drew on a little scrap of paper. They took a photo of the actual map, so the treasure map of this space. But I know the black walnuts are somewhere right in this area, and so what I'm going to do is pull aside. This is a sacrificial folding crate of sawdust, like I mentioned. Then we've got our leaves, and we're well below freezing today. As you can see, it's very, very crusty on the top. But even just going down, oh, I don't know, what is that, 6 or 8 inches, you can see there's moisture here. It's actually just slightly above freezing. And I'm going to go a little further in here and see. That's pawpaw, so I'm going to keep that buried. Took some rooting around. It's definitely, the idea with this is not to have it be something where it's like every week or two we're going in and exploring them. It's like to bury them for the winter and come back to them in the spring. But it seems good. Well, first of all, we had the interest in getting the seeds out from our friend, which gives us a chance to give one good inspection on how well this is working. So here it says timber. This is for a black walnut cultivar that we found at a arboretum that had really high quality timber looking growth to it. And here's some things that I'm seeing. Let's see what we got here. I see that on the northern edge of this, where it's a little bit more exposed, I think the dogs might have knocked the soil back, or the leaves back quite a bit. There's some freezing. I don't think that that's deep enough to feel that threatening. I think if the whole thing was seized up like that, I'd be concerned. But as soon as we go in just a little bit, these are seeds that are completely thawed. And we've had temperature down below 10 degrees Fahrenheit. What we're going to be seeing pretty soon is below 0, like a -4. And so we want to insulate a little bit more. But so far, this crate, I would say 90% of it has not experienced any freezing. And that's just by having these seeds in insulative sawdust with direct ground contact and leaves on top. If the leaves hadn't been trampled by frolicking dogs, I think it would have had 0 freezing in there. So here's another folding crate. Well, that bodes well that there's a moving worm, which if we were out in the tundra of the winter would not be the case. In fact, I see a number of them here. So active worm life is very promising. This is a variety called Sparrow, which looks as though it has experienced 0 freezing whatsoever. So this was buried a little bit deeper. These seeds look absolutely super happy. Walnut's a very strong being. I think if the seeds freeze a bit, it's not the end of the world. Let me know in the comments if you have different opinions on that. But this should be extremely viable, high quality seed. Little bit of crust on the north side again. So it's a reminder where the dogs are stomping it all down, we need to fluff it up, which we'll do in a moment. It's worth noting here that where we're just pulling these folding crates is only a few feet away from what is exposed soil, where our dear friend George and Lenny frolic at full speed. And here's an idea of just how different it can be. So, hello George. You're a wonderful man, don't worry. Good boy. So, in that crate with sawdust, with leaves on top, completely thawed out enough that worms can be doing their thing. Out here in bare soil, this is soil, it basically feels like an absolute rock. And this would be the case probably for a good few inches down, especially when we get into very cold weather. Our friends George and Lenny will be running on straight up moonscape, like rock solid moonscape. So bare, open, exposed soil, extremely inhospitable for the storage of seeds in a cold climate, but deep layers of leaves, some sawdust around them. As messy as that is, it's extremely functional. We'll go through these in a little bit more detail in a moment, but there's 4 folding crates of black walnut, 4 different varieties in here that we can store in the garage for now. We'll go through and get a count and get them organized and labeled for our friend, for our trade. But so far, that system held these seeds beautifully with no intervention other than big, big piles of leaves. And without the frolicking dogs, it would have been 100% frost-free, I'm sure. We're able to keep the temperature in the garage solidly above freezing. Not dramatically above, but solidly above. With a really simple intervention here, this goes down into the basement. So the garage is attached to our home. We've got a fan down there that is blowing air from the basement. It's not particularly hot down there. It's not a heated basement, but it's probably around 50 Fahrenheit down there. And so this is continually topping off the garage with a little bit of a buffer of warmth to keep things from seizing up. So those 4 crates will be out and in the garage. They'll be most of the seeds will be handed off, and what remains we can put down in the root cellar for storage until spring. Juan's going through right now and just basically getting material back up against the crates that are still underneath. So there's whole course through here. These are pawpaws and gumi and seaberry. And again, the crates on top are just sacrificial sawdust crates that are left over from shipping season, and they keep the dog insanity down to a minimum. But once we get this packed back and there's good contact of all the leaves and insulation against the crates that are in there, we'll add some leaves from our chicken yard just to really fluff stuff up. The best insulation we can get is deep layers of super fluffy, dry leaves. That's our ideal scenario. What I don't want to do is risk really exposing the seeds that are on this end. So these are the peaches and plums and cherries and things like that. Again, buried in direct ground contact. We've added compost and material up against the outside. The fence is here just to hold the leaves in, but there's about 20 folding crates underneath all this. There's 2 courses of them. And we'll top this all off with extra fluffy leaves as well, just to insulate for the winter. But we're just going to trust that those are okay. Using that 1 sample of the black walnuts. What I don't want to do coming into a cold snap is pull everything out, expose it to the air, and put everything back. I think the ground coupling is solid enough. We just want to infill with dry puffy fluff around the outside. We'll come through the little side gate here. It was intense enough that Juan had to actually go through with a shovel and crack all the ice. The freezing and thawing, or the freeze heaving, made it so that the gate wouldn't even open. Winter's tough. You may remember, if you watch the channel a fair bit, this is our leaf corral that we set up in the fall that we're digging into right now. We dumped maybe 150 leaf bags into here. I've been chipping away at harvesting from this to add carbon and insulation for our chickens' winter run. That's why it's in this position. And right now Juan is getting some of the leaves that they got rained on and snowed on. There's a little bit of moisture in there, but overall they're still pretty dry and fluffy. This will go a long way to protecting those seeds. Slow and steady, but this will add a lot more insurance. The crates that are down in ground contact underneath all this, I feel confident, even with the cold weather coming in, should be safe. I'm glad we got as much leaf material as we did. We used it so much in different areas, and we're probably only about a third of the way into this pile, and the north end is what we actually covered so it can stay dry. So we're working with stuff that's been exposed. The beautiful part with this is entirely waste material, costs $0, has no electricity or fossil fuel dependency. It's waste stuff that would have been going to a composting system anyway. And when we're done using this as insulation, it's all organic matter that will feed worms and then feed the soil. So no foam board insulation or complexity and that kind of stuff, just waste material providing warmth. I realize a very, very reasonable question that might come up in folks' minds is, why are you going through all the effort of putting this, the folding crates in contact with the ground and then building up so much? Why not dig down into the earth and bury them? Two things for our context, and this might not be the case for yours. Number one, we're doing this underneath the canopy of these big, beautiful trees. They confer a lot of protection from winter intensity, from cold winds and the like, and so being in association with them will give some buffering to the crate, and we don't want to damage their roots. So that's one thing, and also it would be nice to feed their roots as a thank you for this. Number two, our water table's super high, so when we get a fair bit of rain or thaw, there's water running through here, and if we were to dig down even 6 inches, most of these crates would be in standing water, which would be very hard on a lot of the tree seeds that we have in here. So we have to do ground contact and build up. If you're really well drained, dry, in an area that doesn't have a lot of tree roots, you might consider burying these things, and then you need a lot less mulch. But we're fine with this for now. I'm just tossing in the last finishing touches, some on the outside, most on the inside. And I think that'll be all we need to do for today. We've got our black walnuts to go through and count and share with our friend. Lovely that he's interested in growing out more than 1,000 of named black walnuts. And then we've got these seeds buried. I think we're going to be getting 4 to 6 days of really, really cold, and then, you know, average cold again. But I suspect / trust that we'll be able to leave this as is for the rest of the winter now. We'll do a follow-up video in the spring. Our first order of business will be to get access to this area and address Siberian peach and standard peaches. There's some Japanese and American plums. There are cherries banked in there. And then we'll go down the line, work on hazelnut and chestnut, get into the pawpaw, the gumi, and the seaberry, and we'll talk about that as time allows. But good food for thought that if you have access to leaf bags or wood chips or sawdust and want to store high-value things that are ideally not going to freeze for the winter, you can do so with next to no infrastructure and money. And just one last note, these trees would not love this material left against them for the long run. I just want to address that. In the spring, we'll pull the mulch away from the trees before it starts really decomposing and getting warm, and make sure the trees' needs are respected, in case you're seeing that and wondering. So the way we got this going was to select a nice site under the shelter of these beautiful trees. It's in the backyard and very easy to keep an eye on, and relatively flat and well drained. So it's a really nice site to store these folding crates. We used a hay fork and a rake to pull the bulk material away so that the crates could be in actual ground contact with the earth. This is back in November when things are still warm. All these folding crates have various types of seeds that we were storing throughout the summer, so it's a way to consolidate and organize and clean things up a little too. So here we are starting the basic layout. It's going to be 2 rows of crates next to each other, and we'll use our trusty free leaf bags, our abundant leaf bags, to do the insulation. The layout's starting to happen. You can see I'm raking material up against the outside of the crates as they get laid in. The boys are patrolling to keep an eye on things and help make sure everything's according to code. It seems so far we're doing it okay. Here Juan is hanging with Zaldini at the end of our shipping season while I'm getting the last organization of these crates and starting the flagging process. The dogs ended up crushing most of the flags, but we get the gist. Burlap sacks will help unify the crates underneath and couple them to the earth. While Juan teaches Zelda some of the tricks of our nursery business, we get some caging up around the crates, and this will help corral the leaves. This will be the material we use to make the bottom of air prune boxes in the future, but for now it holds leaves really nicely. I can go through and dump those leaves that will insulate and feed the worms and be a really nice natural buffer for the winter for the tree seeds below. George and Lenny will check for badnesses. So far so good. George thinks it's all right. Pretty soon these guys will be getting in here and making a wild time of it, but oh well. And as demonstrated here, it happened very quickly. But they're in the backyard and they really need to have play space too. It's limited space overall for them, and so good permaculture design incorporates rather than segregates, integrates rather than segregates. And so they're in here playing, and that's fine. We use some leaf bags as bumpers to hold insulation and leaf up against the crates. There's our leaf corral ready to harvest from this fall and winter as needed, as you saw just now. And there it is, actually looking clean once it was set up. It's a little bit more chaotic now, but it feels like it's really functional.